Off. Welcome. This is the Coming Quantum Cybersecurity Threat. And today we have an A list of speakers for all of you, and we're going to discuss the quantum threat, the opportunity in both commercial and government sectors. We're also going to talk about solutions and ways that enterprise and government can get ready for this quantum threat. This is all in preparation for the day when quantum computers will crack our public key encryption. Again, if you have questions during the webinar, there's a Q&A box. I think most of you should see it at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to enter your questions anytime along the webinar. We'll try to get to as many as we can at the end, depending upon time. And if we don't, if you put your email address in next to your question, then we'll be happy to get with you later. We'll also post contact information at the end of the webinar for you so that we can get in touch. So without further ado, let's get started. My name is Skip Sanzeri. I'm co-founder and chief operating officer of QuSecure. I started my journey in quantum computing about 4 years ago when I co-authored a book called The Quantum Design Sprint. I realized the world needed a new form of quantum computing that would solve problems. And as we know, our CMOS technology is reaching its limits. So we thought that it would be good to have this new form that'll be able to calculate in much faster ways, do much more and work across a lot of quantum applications. But what became clear for us way back when was that job one wasn't quantum programs, because we knew that in order for these quantum computers to gain enough power and become entangled, have qubits entangled, that the first job, that it would take a lot to get that done. And obviously you've got some big companies still working on that, everyone from Google and IBM, PsiQuantum, IonQ, and many others. But job one that was evident was cybersecurity, because quantum computers can hack right through our PKI when they have enough power. Shor's algorithm showed us that. So we started working on the problem of how do we prepare enterprise and government for this, and we launched our company. So I met in 2019 with Dave Krothamer, who's CEO and co-founder of QuSecure, and then co-founders Rebecca Krothamer and Costa Vilk joined us in the journey, and we kicked the company off. Prior to that, I was a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, and then also moved into venture capital as well before launching QuSecure. We have an amazing lineup of speakers today. Again, this is an A list, some of the world's true leaders in quantum computing. So I think all of you will enjoy this. Our first speaker is Jack Hidary. And in the quantum computing world, Jack needs no introduction whatsoever. He's not only one of the global leaders in quantum computing, but he's also renowned quantum computing author and head of quantum computing and AI at Alphabet X, formerly Google X. Currently, Jack focuses on AI and physics at Sandbox, and he's the author of Quantum Computing and Applied Approach. This was published by Springer and is a textbook in many classrooms. Here's a picture of it. I have Jack's book right here. I'm waiting for Jack to sign it. Jack, I'm going to have you sign this one day when I see you next. Anyway, Jack is an amazing individual, and we're so happy to have him on the webinar. And before we get started on that, let me make the other introductions to our A team here. So we've got Pete Ford on as well, and he's QSecure's SVP of Federal Operations, one of our nation's true war heroes, spending 26 years in the United States Air Force, retiring as a colonel. He flew F-15s and logged over 3,000 hours, and with hundreds of hours in combat in the Iraq War. He's also a weapons school graduate and recently left Raytheon to join QuSecure. At Raytheon, he was a director in the Missile and Defense Group. We have Rebecca Krothamer, co-founder and chief product officer at QuSecure. She's been recognized globally as a quantum leader and was CEO of Quantum Thought prior to co-founding QuSecure with us. She's listed as Forbes 30 under 30 for quantum computing in 2020 and was named one of the top 12 women in quantum computing in the world. She also leads the Quantum Futures Board for the World Economic Forum. She graduated Stanford with a degree in symbolic systems. Greg Bullard is our cleanup man today. He's QuSecure's Chief Technology Officer, Head of Engineering. Prior to QuSecure, Greg was VP of Engineering at Qualcomm, where he grew a team of engineers from 40 to over 250 in 5 years. Greg specializes in vulnerability analysis and attack, and has developed cybersecurity strategies for multiple billion-dollar organizations. So with that in mind, this is our team. Let's kick this off. Jack, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Skip. It's great to be with you and the entire team. Let me see if I can now share my screen as well. Yep, here we go. Great. All right, Skip, you see the slides? Great. Real pleasure to be with everyone today. This is a critical juncture in the quantum journey. Many of us have been involved for quite a number of years, and this year, 2022, is proving to be already just 1 month in a blockbuster year for these kinds of technologies and the implications, in particular for cybersecurity. I'll be discussing some of the background and lead up to this moment, and then look forward to Q&A from the team and from the audience. So the rise of quantum computing poses a absolute existential threat to the many protocols that we use in cyber today. Skip alluded to that in his introductory remarks. And today I'm going to build some background as to how we got here and what both governments, companies, and other organizations are doing about this, and what you in this audience can do about it and participate in this generational migration from one cyber standard to the next. This doesn't happen very often, but it's happening right now, and we are all part of it. And we encourage as many people as possible to join in on this transformation, because it has implications not just for cyber, but for other technologies that we use as well. Right now, we're in the third quantum revolution. The first revolution started in 1900 with Max Planck's realization that we needed a new way of looking at the data that was coming out of key experiments. Experiments done from 1880 to 1900 did not conform to the physics of the time. The double slit experiment, black body radiation, the stability of the atom. These are just but a few. The discrete spectral lines of hydrogen and other elements. These are but a few of the experimental data points that really confused physicists right before the year 1900. Max Planck, in quote unquote, an act of desperation at his villa outside of Berlin, decided to jot down a novel equation that made the assumption of a different kind of physics than was existing at that time. And that was quite surprising, because if you would have known Max Planck at the time, you would have voted him least likely to cause a revolution in any field, let alone physics. And that's because Max Planck was a very mild-mannered physicist in his 40s at the time. He got his PhD in thermodynamics, filed his PhD, submitted that in 1879, interestingly enough, the year that Einstein was born. And he was content to ride out his years as a very high status professor in the university in Berlin, teaching and doing research in thermodynamics. But destiny had other ideas for him, and he came up with initially an equation, and then had to begin to step back and understand what were the implications of this equation. And of course, the others in the picture on the left at the first Solvay conference, at the 1927 conference, kicked in. And back in the year 1900, 1905, then Einstein publishes his Annus Mirabilis papers, one of which was the photoelectric effect, for which he got the Nobel Prize. He never got a Nobel Prize for relativity, but did get it for the photoelectric effect, which built specifically and explicitly in the paper on Max Planck's great achievement in explaining then the photoelectric effect using Max Planck's ideas that he used to explain the black body radiation phenomenon. And then many others in this photo, of course, contributed, and 17 of these individuals got Nobel Prizes for their work in founding quantum mechanics, which around the year 1935 was canonized as Dirac and others put the finishing touches on it. We then moved to the second quantum revolution, where the students of the folks on the left and their students began to take those principles and build devices, actual devices in the world, such as the transistor, built by 3 physicists at Bell Labs, which enables us to talk today, all of us on Zoom right now, the MRI machine built with quantum physics principles, without which it would not work or could be conceived. And of course, the laser, just as three examples of the second quantum revolution that took place from the 1940s, plateauing out in the 1980s in the application of quantum principles to very significant technology revolutions that affect all of us. But now we find ourselves, starting about 2-3 years ago, in the third quantum revolution. And the third quantum revolution entails three major aspects in addition to computing itself. We'll talk about computing in a minute, but on top of that, we have simulation and optimization, the ability to simulate molecular interaction, atomic interaction, which of course is governed by quantum dynamics, quantum mechanics itself. We cannot use older classical notions in modeling and simulating the interaction at the atomic and molecular level. We have to use the quantum equations, and this necessitates new physical computing substrates and new ways of approaching these very large-scale problems that exceed the kinds of things we can do traditionally. Sensing, quantum sensing, using a variety of quantum devices as sensors takes us beyond the classical regime in how we can detect magnetic fields, gravitational fields, and many other phenomena around us. The quantum sensors, such as NV sensors in diamond, such as OPM and others, take us into the quantum regime, where we can do so much more with greater sensitivity. And finally, our big topic of today is security and communications. And quantum catalyzes the need to move into new regimes in protecting the world's data, both data in motion and data at rest. And so we'll talk about that today. But we are now squarely in the third quantum revolution, and we welcome everyone on this call to join in. If you feel intimidated anytime by the word quantum or by quantum mechanics, you're in a very large boat in a cruise liner of folks, and Feynman and many others, Niels Bohr, are both quoted as saying, if anyone says they understand quantum mechanics, they do not understand quantum mechanics. It still puzzles all of us till today. But the good news is there's a lot of online content today, online courses from so many institutions and from individuals, books, online websites, really great ways to get into this field. So do not feel it's too late. If you haven't studied quantum in undergraduate or grad school, it's fine. There's many ways to on-ramp into this field. If you have a background in cryptography, that's a great leg up to go into this third area of the new quantum era of cybersecurity. And there's ways to ramp up into that as well. This is a wonderful golden era of education and self-learning. And this is a moment to dive with both feet in. So do not feel you're left out if you didn't study these topics in school. In fact, if you had studied those topics any more than 1 year ago, you would have studied very outdated material. So the good news is you can leapfrog in, join in the revolution, and be part of moving the transformation forward. Quantum computer technologies to start with. There's many ways to build a quantum computer. And right now, there are many companies out there, well-funded, both big tech and startups that have now raised $600-700 million each, having multi-billion-dollar valuations, hard at work building these computers, and all going for that same goal of a fault-tolerant, error-corrected, scaled quantum computing platform. Many exciting announcements happening every month in this field. So I encourage you to check out these various ways of building a quantum computer. There are others as well that I don't mention on that slide, neutral atom amongst them, that are very promising as well. And the difference in the quantum computing revolution compared to previous revolutions is that quantum computers are born on the cloud. They're cloud native. When we look at the previous cycles of computing hardware from the IBM 360 and the DEC and VAX, and then we went to the SGI and Sun mini computer systems, and then we went to Dell and its many competitors, then Lenovo, and now the commoditization, the complete commoditization of classical computers. Then, of course, the parallel revolution with GPUs with the rise of NVIDIA and their tremendous success and innovation in taking a graphical processing unit initially meant for video game rendering and production, moving that squarely into the neural network deep learning era, and now beyond that, and the great success NVIDIA and many other chip companies have had. There's many startups now in the ASIC space, such as GraphCore and Grok, and many others, Cerebras now also with a whole wafer as a chip. So a lot of exciting stuff. But when we see the past 30, 40 years of that evolution of classical hardware, we see that over 70 years in each mini cycle, they get commoditized. That commoditization will happen even quicker with quantum hardware because it's cloud native. So most people will not be buying quantum computers. They'll be accessing it over the cloud. And right now, you can go to any one of these providers and access a quantum computer this minute as we speak on this call today, and access actual quantum computers and run real states of superposition entanglements using CNOT gates and other gates on actual computing hardware. So it's a very exciting moment that we can access that. And the good news about that commoditization, which means that the pricing will come down significantly. It's already very accessible, will get even more accessible, both to academia and to corporations. And we're seeing a lot of innovation across all these companies, both in the West and in China, in access to these kinds of computing devices. As the computers scale, they'll become accessible over the cloud, and we'll see this commoditization happen even more quickly. That's good for all of us on this call today. As we build applications on those computers, they'll be more accessible with greater numbers of qubits and higher fidelities, and then ultimately error-corrected high fidelity qubits that we can run even more applications on. But when it comes to cyber, we have to be aware of the threat that is now upon us. Cyber tech, we all know about weaponized cyber tech. No need for reminders with news every day of ransomware and of attacks and breaches of hundreds of millions of people's credit cards, personal information. IP and corporate espionage is rampant now across the world, with nation states and independent actors hacking into networks to grab IP from pharma companies, from other high-tech companies and high IP rich companies in order to gain leverage in the commercial marketplace, to say nothing, of course, of government-to-government espionage as well. And so this has led to the attack that's underway right now, which is store now, decrypt later, SNDL. Some we also say is hack now, decrypt later, which means that even though we don't have quantum computers this minute that can run Shors to a scale to break the length of keys used today, that has not stopped nation states and independent hackers hacking into networks of companies and countries right now, grabbing RSA encrypted data, storing it for a number of years from now when they can decrypt it with increased computing power. So that is the SNDL attack happening right now. How do we defend against that attack? That'll be a core topic of our discussion today. The exponential speed up that Shor gives, I think, is well known to many here, and Peter Shor showed in his paper from 1994 when he was at Bell Labs at that time. Today, Peter, of course, is at MIT, and I encourage everyone on this call to take the course offered at MIT online. It's a 4-week quick course by Peter, by Ike Schwang, and others at MIT. Great content there. If people want to log on to MIT X Pro and avail themselves of that course. But Peter has continued to serve the community decades after his initial discovery. But his discovery really set off a huge bomb in the space, making it clear that RSA's days ultimately would come to an end. And so in 1978, Ravesh, Shamir, and Edelman introduced RSA, and that's become the standard for so many decades since then. But now we're in a generational migration beyond RSA, getting beyond RSA into the post-RSA era. And it's a very, very exciting time for that. And so we see on this slide here that we are now in the midst of having to upgrade 20 billion physical devices. The software on 20 billion devices has to be upgraded, and that includes 7-8 billion mobile phones. It includes billions of IoT devices. It includes billions of laptops and servers. All these have to be upgraded, and that is underway already starting now, let alone, obviously, many software applications on networks, enterprise software, individual software, all has to be upgraded, not just a one-time. This is not just like a Y2K one-time ball game. This is a continual process to keep improving the ability to go from the single protocol of RSA into a multi-protocol world where multiple protocols are now being blessed by the world cyber community. This is a more complex, nuanced world that we're going into in the post-quantum era. That's why we call post-RSA also PQC, post-quantum cryptography. I'll use those interchangeably throughout this talk. And so 6 years ago, NIST, along with its counterparts around the world, began a process to examine and analyze the various candidates to replace RSA into a post-quantum period. And that led to 3 rounds of culling. Submissions in round 1 were 82, 69 of which were accepted. Round 2 culled that down to 26, and then 15, and now we're down to the 7 finalists. And as I'll discuss now in a few slides, we're now down to the acceptance of the core protocols that we're all going to be moving to in the post-quantum period, PQC or post-RSA period. When I say post-RSA, again, RSA is not the only protocol that is now vulnerable. Elliptic curve, other protocols based on Diffie-Hellman also vulnerable. And so I'm just using that as a general catch-all for the era that we're going from and to, from RSA to post-RSA. Europe also very engaged with NIST in the standardization process, and the counterparts to NIST in Germany, France, UK, and other countries, absolutely shoulder to shoulder in participating in these areas, submitting many of the protocols into the NIST process. It's a global process with contributions from many, many countries, making it to the end, and participation from all those agencies around the world. This is a summary slide of the final moves from 15 down to 7, both in encryption as well as digital signatures. And you can see that Lattice Space cryptography certainly figures prominently in there. I should note that this is, again, a global phenomenon with investment being made across the world on the governmental basis. This slide really captures the governmental side of the $1 billion plus on the National Quantum Initiative in the US, $1 billion plus in the EU, $10 billion plus in China. What is not captured on the slide are the billions additional of investment now happening just in the last 7-8 months in the private sector, particularly in the US, Canada, and Europe, in private companies such as PsiQuantum, IonQ, Xanadu, many, many other companies that have raised significant rounds in the last year are all joining in on this total contribution and investment in this area. So when we look at cybersecurity and post-quantum crypto, we can first look as a backdrop and context, the Executive Order 14028 from the White House in May of 2021, which first focuses on zero trust architecture, ZTA. ZTA is critical. Anyone on this call in the cyber realm will be very familiar with ZTA, which of course we all must move to a ZTA stance and posture if we're to contain the kinds of attacks that we see happening on a regular basis today. And that is underway with both that executive order, but also many activities happening in the private sector as well. On January 19th, though, just in the last few weeks, the US government issued an additional national security memorandum, which has key directives in it that build on EO 14028 with specific focus on post-RSA and PQC. And I'll be describing some of those specific items here today. So I recommend to folks to check out EO 14028. It's available online, and the zero trust architecture that the federal government is moving to, and many federal governments across the world. This is not a US centric idea at all. This is a global phenomenon moving to ZTA. And part of that also is now the NSM of January 2022 just happening right now, with very specific milestones and goals. And since it's a lot of text, I'll summarize it in a timeline here, where within 30 days of the January 19th directive, the NSA is updating the CNSA in order to adopt several of these newer protocols. And to remind ourselves what the CNSA is, it's the Commercial National Security Algorithmic Suite, which is the core algorithm suite containing the standards that we all use. Although it's managed by the government, we in the private sector all turn to this as well for the kind of standards and protocols that we use, be it in financial services, in healthcare for HIPAA compliant data, in many other sectors as well. We depend on what is in this algorithm suite for our security and safety. And so within 30 days of Jan 19, NSA is updating with these new protocols that come from the NIST process, these open processes that have now been publicly discoursed across the cyber community over the last 25 years since Peter Shore's paper, and in particular the last 6 years with a very open, multi-stakeholder, multinational process that many of us have participated in, and also will be updating the CNSS, which is the core committee. And just to remind ourselves, the CNSS is the Committee on National Security Systems, which is 21 governmental agencies that have responsibility to look after the security of data, not just within the federal government, but also the key infrastructure of the country. And again, what we hear also from other countries in Europe and many other parts of the world, that they are moving in parallel in a harmonized fashion, since they were part of this process as well. And so within 60 days, there'll be notification of the CIOs of the federal government. 90 days, the CNSS shall be starting to update its policies and directives. That means that if you have a policy inside the federal government that for this kind of data or this kind of data movement, you need to use this kind of key and this kind of protocol, these will now be updated given the updates of the CNSA, of the algorithm suite itself. And then within 180 days of Jan 19, the key federal agencies that contain sensitive data will be doing a top to bottom assessment of where they're using vulnerable protocols such as RSA, elliptic curve, and others in order to start that migration process to a post-quantum cryptographic world. So very specific milestones, very specific actions on the part of the federal government as a signal to the marketplace that it is time to move. So while this NSM building on 14028 is initially dealing with the federal government, it has deep ripples out, almost like gravity waves that we detect with LIGO, deep waves out to the private sector, because we in turn take our cues from the CNSA and these actions as well. This is a graphical depiction of some of the movement that we'll see over the next 6 months as CIOs across the federal government begin to act on the directive and the EO. And this leads us to a conversation around what exactly are these PQC approaches? What are we talking about? I think most of us on this call are familiar with the details, or at least generally familiar with RSA, Ravesh Shamir Edelman, and how that affords us PKI, public key infrastructure, or PKE, public key encryption, having a public key and a private key, depending on what we call a one-way trapdoor function, which is a function that allows us easily to encrypt something, but very difficult to go back the other way unless you have the trapdoor, which is our way of saying the private key. So one-way trapdoor functions are the key to making successful public key infrastructure with a private key and a public key. much easier than meeting in a bunker or a skiff every minute to exchange one-time pads. If you want to interact with Amazon or other e-commerce players, it's going to be very difficult to fly to Seattle every minute and exchange one-time pads. Much easier to use public key infrastructure, of course. And so mathematicians and cryptanalysts worked for 25 years since Peter's paper to look for mathematical frameworks that had the same characteristics that were so great about RSA that we can build public key infrastructure around it, but did not depend on the hardness of factoring large numbers into their prime factors. That's the core of RSA. And unfortunately, of course, Shor's algorithm is very good on a scale quantum computer of doing exactly that thing. So we've got to move beyond that particular math framework into other mathematical frameworks. The good news is, after a lot of work, the academics did a superb job in coming up with a number of approaches that have stood the test of time in terms of being able to enable public key infrastructure with public keys, private keys, enabling the same idea of a one-way trapdoor function of easy to encrypt your message, very difficult to go back the other way unless you have the private key. And just to give a flavor of some of these, we have a whole course that takes weeks, about 3 to 5 weeks. If people are interested, we'll be offering a course on the math behind post-quantum cryptography. And we hope to offer that to partners and the public over the next months as this area becomes of greater interest to people. But now we've already had many, many requests coming into our team to teach the mathematics behind post-quantum cryptography. It's fascinating mathematics, and I encourage everyone to take the time to learn some of the math behind it, because just intellectually alone, I think you really enjoy it. Lattice Space is one such approach that has now stood the test of time. And as I showed in the NIST process, a number of the winners, of the finalists coming out of 3 rounds of culling in the NIST Space process are Lattice Space. So it has stood 25 years of testing, and also specifically the pummeling of the global NIST and multinational process. And here we have a lattice, which we can think of as a vector space, but discretized. So instead of every point being available, we only have these discrete points as you see here in this depiction. And we then look, for example, for the shortest vector problem is one way of thinking about this, where we offer a certain computational basis in this particular vector space, this lattice space, but then the private key is the shortest vector basis, and that actually turns out to be a very hard thing to find if you're not offered it. So without going into huge numbers of details, we're going to say that this is one of the methods that has stood the test of time. It does not depend on factoring large numbers, doesn't depend on prime numbers or anything related to the way that RSA works, but does allow us to have both a public key and a private key, and therefore is a robust solution to encrypting our data without fear that we'll be losing that data to large-scaled quantum computers. There are other ways of doing this as well. Code-based is one, isogeny-based, hash-based, multivariate-based. Again, we don't have time today to go into all the mathematics here, but stay tuned. If people are interested, please reach out to us so you can sign up for our open courses that we'll be offering on the background to PQC, and we'll be offering that to partners and to the public. One note on China. China has been focusing not only on PQC, but even more so on QKD. And so since this will come up as a topic of conversation, I did want to note some details on quantum key distribution. And so back in 2016, the Chinese launched the Misia satellite, named after a medieval scholar, Moza, in Mandarin. And the Misia satellite has successfully demonstrated quantum teleportation of messages and information from space to ground stations. And they published that in a number of peer-reviewed publications. I encourage the audience to check out those publications. Very interested to see. We all knew about quantum teleportation for many years. The protocol itself is over 20 years old, but it was great to see it in practice and to see that happening from an actual satellite then reaching ground stations. The speed at which it was done was not particularly high, but that was not the point of the demonstration. The point is to show that you can have a terrestrial network, as you see here, a fiber optic cable. For terrestrial QKD, where you'd have a number of quantum repeaters every few hundred kilometers or so. And then you would connect this terrestrial network with ground stations connected to a series of satellites. That's the architecture the Chinese are going after here. And they have quite a number of academics and companies building out this infrastructure. Quantum repeaters still remain elusive, both in the East and the West. And it's something that a number of us are working on. But quantum repeaters, I believe, will ultimately happen, allowing the repeating and amplification of a quantum signal. Again, let's recall that today's internet, no matter how fast the speed you have, even if you have a gigabit per second speed to your home right now or to your phone, depending on where you are, that network cannot carry states of superposition and entanglement. So there is a parallel internet that is being built out around the world now in the same way that ARPANET, DARPANET, the internet was built out, node by node by node, interconnecting those nodes. Just like in 1969, we had the beginnings of the build out of ARPANET, then DARPANET, and today will be called the internetwork or the internet. So too, there will be a parallel internet, a quantum coherent internet. Coherent, just code word for a network that can carry and maintain states of superposition and entanglement. Beyond quantum communications, let me note that there's a lot of scientific interest in having such a network. And so if you wanted to have distributed quantum computing, DQC, and be able to have a quantum computer in New York City, a quantum computer in London, a quantum computer in Mountain View, and all connected so that they can share different computing states, passing them amongst themselves, the same way we do distributed computing in the classical world. For that kind of distributed computing, you need a quantum coherent network. So there's even a bigger driver to creating a parallel quantum internet than just communications. And that is DQC, distributed quantum computing, as well as the prospect of connecting quantum sensors, which output quantum information and then being directly fed into quantum processors on that quantum coherent network. So we have a world ahead of us over the next few decades that is quite exciting. And it's exciting to see some of the work being done both in China, but also being picked up by Europe. There's a lot of interesting QKD work being done in Europe right now. In fact, a number of countries are following the Chinese in launching satellites that do QKD and quantum teleportation at a distance. One example is Singapore's Spooky 1 satellite. What's interesting about the Spooky satellite is that unlike the Chinese Messias satellite, which is a traditional, very large format satellite platform, this is a 3U in satellite terms. We go and use, these are the units we use to describe particularly nanosats. And this is a 9-pound 3U CubeSat or nanosat that is up in space right now from the Singaporean Authority and already demonstrated success in sending quantum signals. So I encourage the audience to check out this very exciting area that will push the envelope of what we can do both space to ground as well as terrestrially over time. So let me just summarize now, and then we'll go to Q&A. We're undergoing a generational change in cybersecurity that is even bigger in many ways than the change we went through in the 70s and 80s to RSA, in that we're now moving to a multi-protocol setup and posture. This is a more complicated, more nuanced world we're getting into. The migration is vast. 20 billion physical devices have to be upgraded. Billions and billions of additional instances on networks and in different applications have to be upgraded, and not just upgraded one time, but continued innovation is necessary to bring latency down, to improve security, to defend against side channel attack, to have a robust global network that is robust against the quantum attack and other attacks they were already familiar with. There's been a long maturation period. This did not happen overnight. Thousands and thousands of academics and company engineers have been involved in this over decades to make this happen. And I do want to recognize the multinational work that's been done in an open process with many people participating from many countries, but the time to act is now. And I do want to just note before Q&A that those listening that are getting their master's or PhDs or in postdoc programs, I do want to encourage folks, we have a training program at Sandbox where we further train people while they're getting masters and PhDs and postdocs. We encourage folks to come and join us for 3 to 6 months. There's an application process. You can email Susie and Monica of our team to find out about that. We pour a lot of time and money into the educational world because right now we don't have the amount of human power and human capital to meet the demands that we just outlined in this talk today, and that you'll hear from the other great speakers today as well in the session. We need more people to join in. If you're curious about getting an online master's or other kinds of certificates in the space, please also ping Susie and Monica. It's a great opportunity right now to join in on this transformation and revolution. If you're in a program right now, you can join us for 3 to 6 months virtually right now. Of course, during the COVID era, you don't have to travel. We do it virtually right now. Prior to COVID, we had hundreds of such masters and PhD students join us on site. But now, of course, we do it virtually. And we also have postdoc positions as well. So with that, thank you, Skip, for mentioning the book as well. Just came out in its 2nd edition and now available, and also a lot of free material on the GitHub site. I encourage folks to go to the GitHub site to get a lot of the code and free information and slide decks that we use in our training as well. So with that, thank you for the time, and back to you, Skip and Rebecca.
Fantastic, Jack. And again, we're also pleased to have you here, one of the true leaders in quantum in the world. Thank you, Jack. Let's move to Rebecca, and we'll keep our time here. By the way, for questions, folks, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A box as we move forward. Rebecca.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Jack. It's an honor to speak after you. If there's anyone who's truly shaping the quantum ecosystem, it's Jack Hidary. And case in point, I also have this book, but sorry, Skip, I did get a signed copy. So thank you, Jack. I'll keep this super short. I think, Jack has spoken really well to this huge threat. And I want to dive in a little bit on the enterprise side and what this means to enterprise. So in 2021, the average cost of a data breach was about 4.2 million. But when it comes to quantum, it's a lot bigger than that. So last year, Hudson Institute, as you can see, produced an 18,000 point econometric model that showed that the first quantum attack on one of the top 5 financial institutions in the US could cause nearly $2 trillion and impair up to 60% of the US's financial assets. So the point here being that this is not your typical data breach. This would mean that a hacker has deployed the capability to break down our #1 line of defense. So let's let's not dwell on the doom and gloom. Let's talk about the opportunity. And it's very important, as demonstrated by Jack, it's to take this thing very, very seriously. But the fix, as Jack did say, is simple. And one thing I want to make sure to get across is that you don't need quantum to fight against quantum. It's these PQC algorithms. It's classical math that eliminates these holes that are exposed by quantum. So as Jack said, the NIST quantum resilient cryptographic algorithms are available now. And when made official, they'll be the standard going forward in this post-RSA world. So really, in essence, kind of bring this home for enterprise. This isn't theoretical. It will be, and thanks to the executive order, it already is a necessary upgrade, and the path for this upgrade is well defined. So let's talk a little bit more about the executive order. It makes for a lot of government, it's now mandated that this upgrade path be defined and pursued. And if we talk before this executive order came out, then the recommendations for enterprise would look a little different. But now it's very clear that especially highly regulated industries will soon follow suit. So healthcare, pharmaceuticals, financial institutions, critical infrastructure, and energy, it'll soon likely be mandated, as well as any organizations that work closely with the government or provide goods and services. So real estate, for example, they also should anticipate requirements to become post-quantum compliant. So there's also an opportunity here that I think we also needed to talk about, which is the opportunity to get ahead and be a first mover. So this is something you can take advantage of right now, and you won't have this for long, to be in the public eye, someone who adopts early. And historically, those that do adopt technology early are experience more than three times the growth that cautious technology adopters, or those who wait until technology is well established, do. And of course, that's not even taking into account the risks of not adopting post-quantum. So what I'd like everyone to take away from this is that, yes, it's a real threat, and it's important to take it seriously and sooner than later, but it's an entirely tractable and addressable problem for enterprise. Greg's going to go into that a little bit more, but right now I'll turn it over to the awesome Pete Ford to dive into the government landscape. Thank you.
Thanks, Becca. By the way, I've got Skip's signed copy, and Jack, I'm waiting, and I will pay for my signed copy. I've got my drool cup out as I read it. Go to the next slide, if you would, please, Pat. We talked about that memo, the May 21st memo that came out that talked about ZTA, Zero Trust Architecture, was significant, as I look at it, following the money. Office of Management and Budget was mentioned quite a bit in there on the thou shalts. The beautiful update 8 months later for this January 19th presidential memo, the first one came out at classified. And then we got the open source one, and it was the one that said, aside from thou shalt not use any unencrypted comms, and by the way, there's money behind this. This is the first time it laid out and said, I want a modernization plan. It better include quantum resilient protocols, and it better include PQC. So that was the gates are open, and Jack elegantly laid out the timeline associated with it. I look back in 1947, Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier. I got a chance to fly with him 65 years later, but guess what? A majority of the airplanes weren't going supersonic. We could do it, but it opened the pipe. Turns out a Quantum is quite a bit faster than supersonic, so it's ready to go fast. So we need to go fast because our government cybersecurity has expanding attack surfaces, legacy systems. It's under prioritized. Now we hope the funding's coming with Office of Management and Budget, with the funding piece. The part that I like that we're doing is particularly in the DoD and D&I space, is we're a US focused and founded company focused on end-to-end capability with legacy systems that's ready for growth in the future. Why? Because first shot, first look, first kill. It also is first protect to defend what we currently have as our way of life and the way we want to go. I want to counter those new attacks. I want to make sure we have resilient operations that don't miss a beat. And I want to make sure that those data breaches are not only identified, but eliminated. And then the next piece is, aside from that, our government is in charge of all the financial pieces and parts that we're going to work with. So it works perfectly to have a US company ready to drive that and lean into the high-tech nature of what Jack talked about, because it's only going to get faster from here. With that, my part is over, and I'd like to turn over to Greg, and he's where our magic happens, and he actually answers a lot of my questions too. So Greg, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Pete. My name is Greg. I'm here to talk to you about how do you solve this problem. So next slide, please. Sometimes when I look at this stuff, I feel like a pig looking at a wristwatch, but what the heck? Solution for post-quantum cryptography. You look at that territory that Jack talked about with the fiber optic networks and all that. It's a highly complicated space, but there's a straight software only solution. So what do you need to do? You first need to NIST approved algorithms. You need to get those deployed on all your local machines, all your servers, everything else. Then you need your quantum resistant cryptographic keys. The keys that we generate on current silicon are not sufficiently random. They don't have high entropy, not high enough. And I've worked as an attacker for years, and we've broken those things and predicted them. And there's all kinds of attack that can be done there. So those keys are really, really critical. You need to get the keys where they need to be safely. and they're in short, you have to have a post-quantum channel. So you need a piece of a special post-quantum computer, which is a photonic circuit, to generate the keys. It's not a computer that's constrained to give an answer. It's a computer that's run unconstrained to deliver as much randomness as possible. And those keys need to travel over a quantum channel to your endpoints, be they servers, mobile devices, laptops, whatever else. And so that's the third step. The fourth step is you got to enable all your software, all your HTTPS sessions or secure FTP or IPsec and VPN tunnels. All that stuff needs to be upgraded to use those new algorithms with those new keys. And then finally, the last step here to deliver on post-quantum cryptography is to make sure you monitor and identify any attacks. The quantum algorithms are expected to fall after some decade or two of analysis and new invention of attacks. We also have software solutions, and they're always vulnerable. So the trick here is you got to do that monitoring. You throw these 5 steps together, and you actually can solve the post-quantum problem on traditional systems without a whole lot of, it's basically a software upgrade. So let's talk to the next slide. So really what you need is a holistic plan, not pieces and parts. The pieces and parts approach will be very difficult. It'll be very difficult to prove you've got security and you've closed all the holes. So first step is really, get the focus on defending. That's assessing the weaknesses in your systems and understanding where you are. Next, the plan, this is a stepping stone to zero trust. And the plan for improvement and implementation, pretty straightforward in my opinion, with those 5 steps we've just outlined. The next thing is, you've got to get the budgets to do this. Now, the funny thing is most organizations are already spending on this. They are spending on security. You may not be spending exactly in the same way, but it's a potentially an increase or a reallocation of your IT budgets. Then comes the deployment of the technology, modernizing the systems, and that's a pretty straightforward space. There's just work to do. Then you get monitoring in place. Most organizations have a pretty have a reasonable monitoring program that does need to be improved to make it robust against quantum. And then you're training your cybersecurity staff and all your employees on what are the post-quantum solutions, what are the threats, what are the risks. So Pat, next one. So let's talk about what the solution that we see looks like. The quantum security as a service is something that QuSecure is working aggressively on. Basically, it's a software-based solution, deploys the algorithms that are NIST algorithms. It deploys the ability to receive the keys from the quantum source, and this works on Earth and in space. It delivers operations and management, so the ability to set policy, deal with monitoring, all those kinds of things. And it does this without additional hardware. You do not need a quantum computer to fix quantum. You just need to upgrade your traditional computing with quantum-proof algorithms. There also is the opportunity to help push towards zero trust. That's with the authentication of users in using post-quantum algorithms. Endpoints and servers are strengthened, with capabilities. So, and then the security strength really is improved with key rotation. You need to avoid some of the side channel attack risks that Jack was referring to. You rotate keys. It makes the attacker, annoys the attacker. I love annoying attackers. I've been an attacker. I've also been a defender. But when you rotate keys, it's just pain. It just makes their job that much harder. You also do this anomaly monitoring, and these are all capabilities that are delivered in the QSAS, and it's on top of a highly available network. This applies on servers, desktops, and laptops with clients, IoT and edge, down to pretty much the dumbest devices. If the device is doing cryptography today, it can be quantum proofed. And also takes care of data warehouses, data at rest, database encryption, things like that. All of it to bring you to zero trust zero trust capabilities, including authentication, data protection, and just operations that you keep your minimum capability, what's the word I'm looking for? Permissions for any operation or access in the system. Skip.
Thanks, Greg. Let's go to Q&A, guys. I know that we are behind time here, so we'll have time for a few questions. Greg, this first one's for you. The question is, time to act is now. What is the act, since neither PQC nor QKD is ready for prime time? Are you talking about planning? And what happens to data that is kidnapped today?
Well, you got a problem with the data that's kidnapped today. That one, I think, is hunker down and try to minimize the impact of that data being decrypted. It will be decrypted. That means changing passwords, understanding, looking at your risk analysis for what happens when that data is opened. In terms of PQC, QKD is very tough to deploy. PQC, we currently have a solution running, which is the real-time necessary components. We are to be releasing very soon a solution which would be highly operable, integratable, easy to administer, all those kinds of things, and tightly integrated with all the existing systems or identity and things like that. So I'll say that we're basically in the next quarter ready to go. So you can be ready to upgrade your systems, put it into trials, and then get ready to decide how to get to deployment.
Thanks, Greg. Jack, go ahead.
I just want to build on Greg's answer. Absolutely agree with everything there. And just to add, in terms of time to act is now, first step in this whole process is discovery. So everyone listening on this call, if you're at a university, if you're at a company, whatever network you're on, step one is, where are you using the vulnerable protocols? Where you have RSA at your key juncture points, either for data in motion or encrypting data at rest. And so that discovery process takes a while. Do not underestimate how long that takes and how intricate that is. Recently was with a customer of ours where we realized that because of M&A over the years, they had acquired about 7 companies. They have 7 different networks. It's going to take about a year to do the discovery in that particular company, just to find all the places that they're using RSA or elliptic curve or other vulnerable protocols. So that time to act is immediate. And that discovery of identifying all the places that you're using vulnerable protocols can form the basis of a migration plan. And as that happens right now in real time, as Greg mentioned, as Rebecca mentioned, as others have mentioned, we are now living in the era where we're getting standardization of the 25 years of work happening to standardize these post-RSA protocols. So if you start discovery now, you will find that as you finish it, you'll have the key protocols to move to. Skip.
Jack, thank you. Greg, next question for you. If NIST hasn't approved post-quantum cryptographic algorithms yet, how do we adopt QSafe cryptography? And if one or more of the new algorithms has a flaw, how do we change? That's a daunting prospect. So maybe talk about crypto agility.
Yeah, one of the capabilities that we've implemented in software is to be able to manage multiple algorithms and set which algorithm is chosen by policy. The NIST algorithms, I'd argue that all of them are pretty strong, but we're going to see them fall. And the trick is you need to be able to, as you're implementing, perform software updates. So we are currently implementing all the algorithms, and when the down select does occur, we will, set the policy flag that only the selected algorithm is the one that should be used. But once again, you need to have crypto rollback as well, because there's no way you can migrate a current organization of any size from pre-quantum to post-quantum without taking it in steps. And so the goal is, through policy, you can go ahead and implement post-quantum on your most critical systems first, and then start expanding that footprint across your organization, finally out to all of your end users. So I'd argue that crypto rollback is exactly what you're asking, but in the reverse direction. We go ahead and select forward.
Great, thanks, Greg. A question here, Pete. Why don't you start on this one, Jack? And I'd like you to jump in as well. Question about quantum sensing. U.S. government, there's great concern about China's progress in the military use of quantum sensing, deep sea navigation, identification of submarine activity. Also in the intelligence space, there's a concern about new risks and physical tracking via quantum sensors. Could the panel address the national security risks of quantum sensing and whether the fears are merited or not?
Aaron, that's a great question. I look at quantum computing, quantum comm, and quantum sensing, and they overlap in the middle. Jack did a great job of breaking them out into the three stooges. They're not stooges, but they're actually three geniuses. I would encourage you, jump on with, follow Jen Savada. She's a federal lead for Jack's team. There's a January, Jack will know the exact date, January of this year, Army, and Ash Carter was the one that was quoted in it. There's a lot of MagNav capability going on. By the way, there's sensors all over the place. There's a guy who's got 26 years flying radars and using sensors. I'm interested in that. Let's look at some of the big strategic, operational, and tactical pieces, but they're all breaking, and they're not breaking at the same time. Jack, maybe you want to talk about what you and Jen are doing really on the MagNav piece if you want, or some of the other things that you want to cover with that.
No, thanks, Pete, and thank you for your many years of service to the country alongside Jen. But Skip, yeah, this is I'm glad this came up as a topic. It's a key area of quantum technology. It doesn't get some of the big spotlight that quantum computing does, or even quantum cybersecurity. Quantum sensing is a bit of the dark horse of the space, but it is absolutely critical. And Aaron is absolutely correct in pointing out the national security implications of quantum sensing. The first thing I would say is let's invest in this area. When I say invest, it's not only companies like ours, QuSecure, Sandbox, and others, investing in this area, but also investing in the human capital in the university programs, PhD programs. It's really important that we invest in the training of individuals, both in the engineering side and in the more theoretical side, to advance this technology. There are a number of nation states across the world, some friendly, some adversarial, working on this area, and it has a lot of different applications. Aaron, the questioner, highlighted some of those applications, but there are about 25 different realms of application of quantum sensing, everything from medical applications to navigation and other areas that are important for life sciences and healthcare, to national security itself. And so what we'll do is I'll post something right now as people are answering questions here that leads people to some more information on quantum sensing. But I encourage anyone on this call who's thinking about entering into quantum technologies, again, look more broadly than just computing itself. That's where a lot of the headlines are, but a lot of the meat and potatoes is happening in these other areas of quantum tech. Back to you, Skip.
Thanks, Jack. Jack, this one's for you as well. Time to prognosticate. When you speak about quantum cryptography, the need for a change in security, when do you think the soonest these attacks could come?
Well, I think that the best answer to that question is the attacks are happening now. That's why QuSecure and ourselves and others are doing what we're doing. The hack now, decrypt later, the store now, decrypt later is underway today. We can all speculate what year we'll have scaled quantum computers in terms of running shores at a certain scale for certain kinds of key lengths. But the fact is that nation states and independent hackers are not waiting for that moment. What they realize is that the NIST protocols are moving forward. People are going to be migrating. And once they migrate to PQC, the adversaries will not have access into that information anymore. And so what they're doing is jumping the gun now to get access to that RSA encrypted information, exfiltrating that via known classical techniques, and then storing that on their servers. So the right answer to that question is the attack is underway right now. Skip.
Thanks, Jack. In terms of security, are there any comparison metrics, QKD, OTP versus PQC? Is it further on, isn't it going to be QKD plus PQC together?
Well, I can start to answer that question. I'll leave it also to others to answer the question. PQC, post-quantum crypto, as embodied in the NIST process, can cover 90+% of all use cases that we are all concerned about, be it storing data in our corporate sectors, at hospitals, in the government sector or the private sector, data in motion, financial transactions, 99% can be handled with post-quantum crypto software. There are a small number of use cases that you may want to use QKD or other hardware-based approaches in terms of having quantum communications. Again, Our feeling is, I don't want to speak for everybody, but our feeling is we're very interested in quantum coherent networks, both terrestrial and satellite. But actually, the main driver for us is having quantum coherent networks to do distributed quantum computing. So I know a lot of folks sometimes are interested in QKD and quantum coherent networks for the purpose of communication. We're actually more interested in quantum coherent networks for the purpose of joint computation. So just want to put that out there. Let me turn to the other panelists for additional comments.
Any further on that, Greg? Nope, we're good. Okay. And Pat Shore, would you mind switching to the last slide? I want to make sure our contact information is up on screen. We won't have time to answer all the questions. We're already a quarter after the hour, and I want to respect people's time here. We'll go for a couple more questions here, but I would say to anybody that is in the audience, feel free to send in emails. We'll be happy to try to help in any way that we can. Maybe one or two last questions. This is for you, Pete. How are the defense and intelligence communities preparing for quantum?
That's a great question. And the answer is, like most things that we've faced with federal acquisition regulations, and I'd love if Jack comes in and joins too, because I know he's participating in that, or Jen can weigh in with it too, as a subset under the FAR. It's a big ship and it moves with a small rudder. But those two presidential memos establishing the zero trust architecture, the money, the funding behind it, the next one that points us to the modernization plan, PQC, and the quantum resilient protocols, those are bellwether events. And they're key for us because we will see the computing, the comm, and the sensing all get funded. And by the way, those are intermittent hits, just like going supersonic when we did. Not every airplane went supersonic after that. A lot will stay in classical. So we need to make sure we're ready to go between classical and quantum computing and post-quantum cryptography that overlays with legacy systems, because we're going to go to war and we're going to use the legacy systems we have right now. So we need to have those ready and light on their feet, agile, and actually able to defend themselves. So hopefully that answered some of those questions. And Jack or Greg, you guys can add in.
Any further? We're good. Let's do one more question. This one is for you, Greg. How do you distribute keys in a denied environment, or in that scenario, do you have static keys?
Yeah, Eric, I appreciate your question. So the situation is we need to effectively pre-place keys. Since the current hardware cannot create post-quantum keys, we really need to get that done as a pre-caching. But with that, there's the ability to allow policy which would maintain the lifetime of a key longer until you can get back into a connected environment. But I would argue that, for instance, battlefield, very important for us to be able to maintain the communications between any end node in the battlefield and the main integration point, the main server that's doing all the common operating picture and such. All is accounted for in how we're approaching the problem.
Thanks, Greg. All right, we're going to wrap here. I want to ask the panelists, Pete, maybe you can turn your camera on as well. Any final thoughts from the panelists to the audience?
Skip, I just wanted to again thank QuSecure for hosting this today. It's been great collaborating over the years, and again on this panel today. My final parting thought is again coming back to education and training. All of us on this call have been involved in training numerous individuals in this area of quantum. It is growing by the minute, and again, as I said in the outset of my talk, please do not be intimidated. I know it seems really wild and really crazy when you think about quantum computing, and then you think about quantum mechanics, and it's already pretty crazy just learning quantum mechanics. But let me just say that there are wonderful pedagogic and educational tools now to ramp people up into the space, online, offline, combinations, videos, text, things like that. This is really a wonderful golden age of education in the space. Please do not assume just because you're 10 years out of school, 20 years out of school, 30 years out of school, that you can't begin to grok these concepts. There are wonderful tools now. Approach both QuSecure and ourselves for material in this area. I'm sure we'll both be happy to point you in the right directions. And again, it's also not too late to get certificates or degrees in this area. You might be 10 years into your career, 20 years into your career. This is a moment to think about adding some qualifications to your career track as we enter this very significant generational transformation in cyber and in the broad set of quantum technology. So really think about that. We're supporting a number of universities, dozens, I should say, across the United States, Canada, and Europe in their launching of master's programs, certificate programs, and other type of adult education, as well as undergraduate education in this area. So this is a moment to really up-level all of ourselves into this new era. Thanks again to QuSecure and to the team. Skip.
And Jack,
Skip,
thank you to you. Final comments from the panel.
I'll add to that. What Jack mentioned to me was exquisite, because as you add those bit buckets, qubit buckets in this case, into what you already bring to the table, the technology development, the application space from developmental test to operational test to application goes fast. So you have expertise probably on this webinar and across the breadth of what we're looking at, from defense industry to healthcare to biotech. You already know the current state of the art of what we're doing. So everything we do that makes it go faster, more efficient, that's going to mean, if you're a business owner, more money, first to the marketplace. That means if you're defending our nation, you do it in more effective manner. So I look at it into all you're doing is adding a more rapid turn to operational test and developmental test and applications that we need right now.
Pete, if I could just add that veterans like yourselves, people who've served in the military, have particular opportunity here. Very often veterans come out of years of service, having served the nation, but sometimes not finding the opportunities they're hoping for. This is a moment when those with service background can really shine. There are a number of programs, again, we can point people to for additional level up in terms of these specific skills, but having a background from the services is a great advantage in this area. And so I encourage veterans to join in on this revolution. Back to you.
Jack, thanks so much. Thanks to all the panelists, and thank you to all the audience members and those that listened in and stayed on. This is an amazing, amazing time for all of us. And as we say, here's to a quantum future. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll get you on the next webinar. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.